Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Ocean Harvest Technology Group PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab, which is just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so, and these will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. Before we begin, I would like to submit the following poll, and I would now like to hand you over to CEO Mark Williams. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Thanks all for joining. It's good to speak with many of you again. Today we're scheduled to talk to you about the research and development program here at Ocean Harvest Technology. I'm assuming most people saw the announcement we put out last Monday, which summarized the results of some of the research trials which we have completed since we did the IPO. And we'll run through those today, but also wanted to take the opportunity to take you through more background as to the R&D program at Ocean Harvest Technology and what the objectives and the strategies are behind that. So to do that, I have my team with me, myself, who you met through the IPO process. Just a quick reminder, I joined the company at the start of last year from a fairly similar industry, also selling into the animal feed space with a new product which is sustainable. I came from the insect protein space. And had worked there for 5 years developing that, and so joined this exciting seaweed opportunity at the beginning of last year. Haddon, you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, it's Haddon Graham. Again, you met me at the IPO. I was an academic, as you may remember, for 10 years before spending the last 30 years with 3 startups launching new products into the feed additive industry. Ian.
Thanks, Haddon, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name's Ian Hutchinson. I'm Technical Director with Ocean Harvest Technology. I joined the company last year. Following that, I was Technical Manager with a ruminant nutrition manufacturer, premix and animal and supplements in Cork in Ireland, and prior to that I spent 5 years in academia between New Zealand and Ireland as well.
So you're going to hear mainly from Ian and Haddon today. I just thought I'd take the opportunity to remind you from a macro perspective what it is Ocean Harvest Technology does. We have built the business over the last 10 plus years really on the basis of the research that Ian will touch on. The research, commercialization and development of the polysaccharides and other bioactive compounds in seaweeds, which work as a prebiotic in animal feeds. So we've got data, which they'll again cover going back over 10 years, which demonstrates the performance benefits of using our seaweed blend ingredient as a feed ingredient in animal feeds across all species. We include the product at about 0.25% of the total feed. We source the ingredients globally, we process them in Vietnam, and then we ship the product by the container load to our customers, who are the producers of animal feed all around the world. So that's the basis of the business. Obviously, the mode of action and the history of the development of the product were very much based on research and development. The proof of the effectiveness of the product to customers is very much based on the R&D program, and a lot of the future value in the business is based on the R&D program. So with that, I will ask Ian to take you through a summary of the R&D program, and then later, more specifically, some of our recent trial results. Ian.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Mark. Okay, so first of all, I just wanted to put it in a context of the purpose of R&D in Ocean Harvest Technology. And really, there's a couple of key points to consider here. The first of all is that we want to gain new knowledge on ocean feed products and their benefits for the animals that consume them, and obviously then for the producers as well. We're looking to introduce new products and applications into the business and into the industry. And in doing so, we have to answer 3 questions about ocean feed from our customers' perspective. And those are the 3 questions you can see here up on the screen. So the first one I'll go through first is, what is it? And really, that's quite a technical question in terms of the composition, the bioactives, exactly what's the components of the product, the quality. So that's around the quality systems it's made under, its origins and its sourcing. So that's the detailed knowledge that's required in terms of what is the product, what is it we're selling. The second then is how does it work? And really here we're looking at the functionality. So those bioactive components I mentioned in the seaweed, how exactly is it they're working? What's the bioactivity? What's the proof behind the claims we're making and behind the function of the product? We're also then looking at use cases, so the applications of the product and which animals to feed it to and in what doses, the interactions that it may have with other ingredients in the diet and other parts of the diet, and also then looking at replacing other ingredients. What do the bioactives let us achieve with the product, and where can we potentially look at reducing costs in the diet through removing other actives? From the customer's point of view then, which is very important, obviously, is will it work for me? And this really here is about the practical application in different systems. So obviously variations in systems around the world in terms of how producers use the product and the application of this. And really what we want to see is the tangible production benefits for producers in all these different applications. And this obviously has to mean that it works in the animals, but also thinking about the cost of inclusion and also then the return on investment in using ocean feed. Typically, producers around the world, depending on the systems, depending on the livestock system and the system of production, would be looking for a return on investment of approximately 3 to 1 to 5 to 1. So that's something to bear in mind when we look at our trial results later on. So the next step then is to consider the R&D trials. So what are we looking for when we're setting up R&D trials, and how do we go through the process? So to start off with, I suppose we've got to look at what do we need to demonstrate from our trial work. And there are 3 points here, the first of which is statistical significance. So this is very important for the scientific community globally around the world. And a p-value of less than 0.05, sorry, is the scientific community standard for stating statistical significance. What this p of 0.05 means, less than 0.05, means that we can be 95% sure that the observed results in any given experiment are not due to chance, and in fact are a true effect of the ocean feed treatment. So as I said, the p of less than 0.05 is the scientific standard for the community. In practice, in industry, a lot of nutritionists would look at a p-value of less than 0.1, so effectively 90% sure observed results are not due to chance, and this would be deemed as a very strong effect. This is otherwise known as a tendency, but that's again important to consider when we're looking at results. So second step then, we're looking at the biological relevance. So in this, we're looking for measurable and tangible differences in animal production metrics as a result of ocean feed uses. So this would be to ensure that the metrics that we're affecting and the improvements in performance are tangible and measurable for the producers. And this runs into then the third point of the successful trial, and that's the commercial application. So these tangible differences must deliver a return on investment in ocean feed and come at an acceptable cost of inclusion. So those are the 3 key points that we look at when we're running these trials and when we're designing trials. So bearing that in mind, we look at 3 different types of trials then when we're conducting these trials. And I suppose the first thing to say is RPO here stands for Research Performing Organization, and that would be universities, perhaps state research agencies, commercial research organizations, that kind of stuff. So first point to consider then is that really we have a broad range of research studies in ocean harvest, both completed, ongoing and planned. And most of these are actually outsourced. So a lot of our R&D program is down to coordinating with research performing organizations around the world, be that universities, contract research organizations, or state agencies as well. So the first type of trial I'd like to outline for you is over here on the box on the left of the screen. And that's the research performing organization, the RPO in vitro studies. Okay, so these are basically lab trials, laboratory scale trials conducted by universities or contract research organizations. And these trials tend to give us a detailed analysis of the composition, the functionality, or the bioactivity of seaweeds. We can also look at assessments of efficacy of our products in gut models or in artificial challenges. And basically what these trials enable us to do is to get a good picture of what will happen in the animal without doing animal trials and without going to the scale and the expense of the animal trials. So they're really, I suppose, a good way of starting off studies and starting to test new hypotheses to see are we having the effects we think we are. Once these have been concluded, then the next stage is to move on to in vivo studies. And in vivo are basically live animal trials. So these are animal trials that we would say are conducted by universities or contract research organizations. In doing the animal trials with these organizations, it enables us to have a controlled assessment of product efficacy under highly regulated conditions. And this would involve very, very detailed measurements of animal performance, of mode of action. You get a lot more, the sampling and the analysis can be performed in much more detail than you get on a commercial farm, whilst at the same time still having live animal studies. And oftentimes these research centres will have farms that are essentially producing for commercial purposes as well. So they do provide a good indication of how the product will work out in the real world, so to say, as well. The final part then is moving on to the customer trials, and this is really the will it work for me piece, if you remember my earlier slide. And this is where animal trials are conducted by customers under commercial conditions. Now, some customers, particularly large integrators in the US, would have their own research barns and research facilities, and this is where some of these trials might be done. Others are very much out in commercial application. And what this is testing, this final step, is the practical application of ocean feed to see that these tangible benefits are realized under commercial conditions, under practical conditions. And that would often maybe bring slightly more challenges than the research farms in terms of the environment that these animals are in, and the performance then of these animals. So finally, that's the step where we're really looking at the economic performance, and that's the return on investment, and obviously the cost of inclusion in the diet as well. So it's important to state that all experiments are designed according to best practice in the scientific field, and that enables us to detect sufficient statistical power to achieve significance in the results. And that's a very important fact to consider if you consider my slide earlier on. Okay, so next I want to move on to just talking you through the process of how we go about setting up an R&D trial. So 3 key points here. The first is to develop a clear hypothesis, and really what we're looking for here is to define what are we testing, okay? How will we measure it, and what do we expect will happen? So some of the things to consider here are the species, obviously, that we want to test it in, the inclusion rate of ocean feed in the diet, the application, so exactly how it's going to be fed and at what stage of, the physiological stage of the animals, the anticipated benefits as well. So what do we expect is going to happen? And an important point to state here is that we must always have a control for comparison. So you'll always say randomly controlled trials, a control group, so we're comparing against it, so we can get a good idea of what we're measuring. Second point then is to define the relevant conditions under which we'll be assessing the product, which we'll be testing the product, and which we're setting up the trial. And really that's around the number of animals, the environmental conditions, so I suppose the physiological state of the animals as well, be it piglets, sows, or finishers, for example, in swine. And then also as well the diets and the duration of feeding. So how long the product's going to be fed for, what sort of the base diet is. And that's important to reflect that the base diet, the duration of feeding, all that sort of stuff is relevant and applicable for the market that we're assessing the product for, and for the market we're trying to get into. And finally then, it's around designing an appropriate and robust experiment. So this comes back to the statistical power, and there's really 3 key things that we're looking at to be able to detect that statistical significance in the results. First of all is the expected size as the effect. So if we're trying to improve feed conversion ratio, for example, we need to have a good picture of how much we're going to improve that. Second of all is the estimated variability between the replicates or the animals in the study. And finally, those 2 factors come in, and that will dictate the number of replicates that we need in the experiment in order to obtain that statistical significance. And I suppose it's probably pretty clear for me to state that good experimental design is vital to achieve significant results and to progress with our research. So that's, I suppose, a little bit of a brief on how we go about setting up the trials and what we're looking for in the trials. I'm just going to pass over to Haddon now to give some examples of how successful trials can impact the business and the commercial figures.
Thank you, Ian. I'm going to talk about 2 of the customer trials that Ian mentioned, and these coincidentally are 2 trials run in North America with 2 integrated customers. And when I say integrated, I mean these customers produce the feed, They grow the animals, they process the animals, and they sell product, either in this case meat, either directly to consumers or to the retail industry. On the right, we have a poultry organization. We presented to this organization a university trial showing the effect of ocean feed, positive effect on the gut microbiome. They had a problem at that time with mortality in their birds, so they decided to test ocean feed. When they fed their standard diet, they had a mortality running just over 8%. When they added a 0.25% ocean feed to that diet, mortality was reduced to under 4%. So a reduction in mortality of over 50%, that alone was sufficient to allow that company to make a buying decision in favor of ocean feed. However, feed efficiency was also improved, but in this case by 8%. So the amount of feed they needed to produce the same amount of animal product, the same amount of meat, was reduced by 8%. So that made it even more attractive. The second company to the right of this, working with swine, their problem was they wanted to remove antibiotics from the piglet diets. And piglets are very sensitive. Remember, these small animals, they move from their mother, well, one day they're drinking milk, to the next day they're eating food based on cereals, like our breakfast cereal. So from 100% milk diet to 100% cereal diet in the case of a few hours. And this is challenging, and they do tend to have diarrhea problems quite often, and mortality can be a problem. And antibiotics have been in the past quite widely fed. This company wanted to move away from antibiotics, so they decided to test ocean feed. So in their standard diet, they had antibiotics. In the test diet, they had 5 kilograms per ton, or 0.5% ocean feed. When they tested these two diets side by side, the ocean feed gave the same or slightly lower mortality than the antibiotics, so were at least as good, if not better. And in fact, the animals grew as well, if not slightly better. And so they managed to reduce the cost of production of their piglets by 27%, even though their primary aim was to take out antibiotics. So it achieved their targets. Both these companies are now customers, still are customers. Both take more than one container, or more than 24 tons of our ocean feed every month, and both are now testing in different applications and further applications within their businesses. They're testing ocean feed to see if it will work for other animals within their organization. And just to go through, Ian mentioned return on investment. Very simply, how do we calculate return on investment? Well, we look first at the costs saved. So I talked about that second American company who took out antibiotics. That is obviously reducing the cost of the feed. Some people take out cooked cereals. Other people take out prebiotics, other probiotics, organic acids. There's lots of different things in animal feed to promote health gut that you can replace with ocean feed. That will reduce the cost of the diet, even when ocean feed is included. You then look at the benefit. The two benefits we normally look for are reduction in mortality, and that is a direct effect on the profitability of the business. The other one they look for is feed efficiency. Remember that in the animal feed contributes to around 80% of the variable cost of animal production. So an improvement in efficiency has a very big effect on the economic performance of those units. It also has a big effect actually on the carbon footprint, direct effect on carbon footprint. But in terms of return on investment, anything that improves mortality and improves feed efficiency, as ocean feed does, will improve the profitability of the business. You then subtract the cost of ocean feed. We don't give it away, we sell it to customers, and so they have to subtract that cost, and from that then they get a benefit. They can divide that by the investment they have made in buying ocean feed, and that gives a return on investment. As Ian hinted earlier, that return on investment should be around 3 to 5 times. So you should get back at least 3 times the cost of the product. But customers normally work somewhere between 3 and 5% is sufficient to get them to buy the product. Ian.
Thanks, Haddon. Look, I suppose what I'd like to do now is run through some of the trial data we have. You've seen how we go about setting up the trials and you know what we're looking for from them. So now really it's to give a bit more background into the trials that we have completed and what we have ongoing. So I've broken it down into categories by species, but also to start off by going through some of the research we have on seaweed itself, on the raw material. And really, this is the section I was talking earlier on about what is it and how does it work. So where we are, so we've got good detailed analysis on the polysaccharide composition of the product, as Haddon mentioned there and Mark earlier on. That's the key active component as it stands at the moment in the product we're looking at and has that prebiotic effect. And we've also got very good data on the quality and the proximate analysis of the product. So we've got a very clear picture of exactly what it is that we're dealing with. The work we've got ongoing, we're looking at further characterization work to expand the existing evidence and provide a platform for further applications. So this would be more around, obviously, additional work on the polysaccharides and continuous work on polysaccharides and the prebiotic effect, but also looking at other bioactives in the seaweed, such as polyphenols, fluorotannins, pigments, and looking at their impact and their effect on, for example, their antioxidative capacity, anti-inflammatory effect, that kind of stuff. So that's really to start expanding out the application and just to look at additional ways that we can benefit the animals. And this will obviously then inform decision making on potentially new species of seaweeds to look at, new processing options and new product applications as well. So moving on then, in terms of the swine trials that we have, so we've completed extensive trials in nursery pigs that clearly demonstrates the effect on the gut microbiome, gut health and performance. And this is in a range of systems and applications across the world. Okay, so we really have got a lot of swine work, a lot of swine trials, and in many ways that's already driving significant customer adoption, but that's going to be the engine for that going forward as well. We've noticed actually from the trials that we've been doing that customers have been seeing additional benefits beyond the immediate gut health and feed efficiency that Haddon mentioned there and mortality. So this is now starting to look at new use cases. For example, as we got there in sows, so looking at helping the sow through the farrowing or the birth process, supporting immune function and reducing inflammation, looking at lower inclusion rates in nursery pigs, and then also obviously new customer trials, as I say, to drive that customer adoption. In the poultry side of things, again, we've got a lot of good trial work, both from research centres and from commercial customers as well. Similar to the swine, we've got good microbiome analysis and performance data, and this is in layers and broilers as well. So the improvements in layers, we're seeing very much around egg production and quality and feed efficiency, but also some interesting effects on things like eggshell quality and strength of eggshells, that sort of stuff. And in broilers, very much along the lines of improving weight gain and improving feed efficiency as well. So where we're going with the new trials we're setting up, we're actually looking at some challenge studies to demonstrate new use cases. So this is basically how ocean feed can help support the birds during various pathogen or toxin challenges. We're looking at lower inclusion rates to help that return on investment calculation. And obviously then as well, across all species, the new customer trials. And really, again, that's coming back to the will it work for me question for different customers in different territories. So moving on then to the bovine side of things. So the first thing to state here, and I'm sure you're probably all aware of the interest in the media over the last couple of years around methane emissions, and in particular, the impact that seaweed can have on methane emissions with some fairly significant reductions being claimed by different products and different technologies in the seaweed space. I suppose it's probably quite important to state that at this stage, there's actually been very little research done at a commercial scale, scientific research at a commercial scale, to show the effect of these seaweeds on methane. And it is critical, and it'll actually become a regulatory barrier, that it is important that this scientific research is done before claims are made around reducing methane emissions. So that is something that we will be focusing on very much so, is going through the university research to demonstrate the mode of action, the proof of this methane reduction, and obviously the performance benefits as well. Just walking back a second there, I suppose, just in terms of the research we've already done, we've got a number of customer trials in different territories around the globe that have showed improved milk production and performance. So that would be around feed efficiency as well. And we have got those laboratory trials as well, but not at the animal scale, not at commercial scale, that would indicate reduced methane emissions with our products. So that's very important. And I suppose the milk production is a big one there. At the moment, no farmers or no producers are getting rewarded for reducing methane directly. So the improved milk production is the economic driver for producers still at the moment. Moving on to the aqua side of things, so we've completed production and efficiency trials in catfish, in salmon, and in shrimp, and we have commercial customers, in particular in the salmon industry, that are using the product on quite a widespread basis. We've also got some very interesting results in shrimp around survival, so that would be following challenges, which I'll come to later on, about how ocean feed is actually helping mortality, as similar to what I hadn't mentioned there earlier on. We've got ongoing trials then in research centres to confirm the efficacy in salmon and looking at some disease challenges there, and also new customer trials with shrimp and catfish to verify the initial positive university trials. And really what we're looking at here is supporting new customer acquisition and growth in what we see as a very high potential area. So moving on to the pet sector, we've got some nice customer trials confirming positive effects on coat condition, fecal consistency, and odor, both oral and fecal odors in dogs. And these are the key things that people would look at when adding seaweed to pet diets. Ongoing, we're looking at controlled studies. So these are scientific studies to provide scientific evidence of the beneficial effects of seaweeds. Also looking at a few tweaks in terms of the blends that we provide and single species and that kind of thing. And really what we're doing here is this scientific research is targeted to help is to help us target the large scale commercial pet food producers to bring scale to the operations in the pet food side of things. Lastly, then, the equine side of things. So we have completed some nice work in terms of microbiome analysis, so that the impact on the microbiome in horses, and it also showed beneficial effects on horse condition and fertility as well in stallions. So a couple of nice pieces of work there. The ongoing work we have, the focus now is on gastric ulcers, which is a big problem in horses. So we're looking at scientific trials to determine the effect of our products on gastric ulcers. And really this will help us target the sport horse sector, is obviously a very lucrative sector. And again, that shift into the large scale commercial feed producers and having the science to back up any claims that we go with in that. So that was I suppose the overview of the trials, what we have and where we're going. What I'd like to do now is just to move on to a couple of specific results, some of which you may have seen in the RNS recently and also in other channels. And really, this is just to break down very, very brief highlights of some individual trials. So the first one I want to go through is a layer trial we did in Taiwan, and you can see here the details of the trial on the screen. So what we're looking at here, compared to the control group, which was a negative control, a standard commercial diet there, we had the ocean feed diet. The ocean feed was supplemented on from weeks 12 to 29 of age. We saw significant improvements in egg production, in feed efficiency, and in egg weight, as you can see in ocean feed poultry supplemented birds. And this really highlights the importance of that statistical significance I was talking about there earlier on. As you can see on the graphs, where there's the differences in superscript between A and B, those denote statistically significant differences in the results at a p-value of less than 0.05. So these performance improvements, as we can see across the board here, they actually improved income per hen by 9%. And gave a return on investment of greater than 10 to 1 in ocean feed poultry. And that's very important when we consider the figures that Haddon and I mentioned earlier on of a target of 3 to 5 to 1. Moving on to a nice study we did in aqua there recently. So this was a catfish trial, juvenile catfish. This was done in Vietnam. And again, two treatments. We have our control group or the control group with ocean feed aqua added into the diet. And here, in this case, you can see ocean feed aqua significantly increased feed intake and weight gain. So basically, the fish ate more, they grew quicker, and they finished heavier than the control group, than the fish in the control group. And that was actually a 14% increase in finishing weight compared with this control. And again, highlighting the importance here of the statistical differences, statistically significant differences in the results. The next study, a piglet trial. So this was nursery pigs. This was done with a research organization in Thailand. And in this trial, we had a control diet, again, compared with ocean feed swine, supplemented into that control diet and fed for a period of 6 weeks from weaning. In this instance, you can see the tendency, so that's a p-value of less than 0.1 to improve feed efficiency and significant improvements, statistically significant improvements in fecal scores fecal diarrhea scores, sorry, in the piglets on the ocean feed swine diet. Fecal diarrhea scores, just to explain them for you. So that's a measure of the consistency in the dung, essentially. The lower the score, the better. And what that is, it's a very, very good measure of gut health and the incidence of diarrhea in the pigs. So you see there significant improvement in a gut health measure. And these performance improvements in this instance led to an increased income over feed cost of 6%, which again gave a return on investment in ocean feed swine of greater than 10 to 1. So again, very, very positive result there from an economics perspective. This next trial again was done in nursery pigs, but a little bit different here in terms of the market in which it was conducted, and obviously the way we conducted the trial as well. So in Europe, excuse me, the European market, particularly in the feed industry and feed additive side of things, very, very, very mature market. And there's high competition in the feed additive industry, with a lot of companies selling a range of additives, as Haddon mentioned there earlier on, into the industry, into the feed industry, and in particular for nursery pigs. So in this instance, we had our control treatment in this group was a positive control in this trial, and that diet actually included 7 different additives that are designed to support gut health. So 7 conventional additives from, for example, terrestrial plant sources, yeast extracts, that kind of stuff, or organic acids. And they were all in this commercial diet to try and improve the gut health of the piglets. What we did then was basically took out all seven of those additives and added just ocean feed swine then. These diets then fed for 28 days from weaning. As you can see here, there were significant improvements in fecal scores again. So again, indicating the favorable impact on gut health and on gut microbiome. And what we see there in terms of the feed costs is ocean feed swine supplementation reduced feed costs per kilo gain by 4% when we replace those conventional gut health additives in the diet. And this demonstrates really to us that its ocean feed is both competitive and cost effective when we're looking at traditional solutions or more established solutions in this space. So it's a very interesting trial and just shows the differences in the markets that we're dealing with. This next trial is going back a step. It's going back into the in vitro research, as I mentioned earlier on. So this is a lab trial. And essentially what we did here, this is exploring a new application and a new mode of action, let's say, for our ocean feed products. And what we're looking at here is a laboratory trial to assess the potential for ocean feed to bind 2 common pathogens, Clostridium perfringens and E. coli, and form agglomerates. So basically binding up the pathogens in the digestive systems of the animals, so they're less harmful and pass through, and also binding mycotoxins. So mycotoxins are a globally important contaminant in feed. They're essentially products from mold growth in cereals, in cereal crops, and contaminate feed to a lesser or greater extent depending on the diets and where you are in the world. But essentially a globally important contaminant in feed across all species as well. Clostridium perfringens is a very important pathogen in poultry production, and E. coli the same in pigs. So these pathogens, these mycotoxins are very relevant and important issues. So as we can see from the results here, from the graphs displayed, the binding efficacy was compared with the negative control, which is essentially 0 binding, and a positive control product, which is a commercial yeast cell wall product. And these are very commonly used in animal diets as a mycotoxin binder and as a pathogen binder as well. So you can see with the mycotoxins on the left, particularly with aflatoxin B1, very, very positive results of ocean feed against both the negative control, obviously, 0 and the positive control, significantly higher binding capacity than the aflatoxin, and comparable again then with the zearalenone. Where we really saw the interest and the benefit here of the ocean feed compared to the positive control was in the pathogen binding study, and we saw much greater capacity to bind and agglomerate both E. coli and Clostridia. So these are very, very encouraging results for us, and will indeed actually lead on to more challenge work we'll be looking at over the next 6 months to year to further develop this avenue. So the last one I want to run through today is just a shrimp study, that we did in Thailand. So in this instance, we had 125 juvenile white shrimp, and these were fed around 125 1 or 2 dietary treatments, and ocean feed added into the diet. As we can see at the graphs along the bottom, we have significant improvements in weight gain, in growth rates, and feed to gain ratio as well. At the end of the trial, some of these shrimp were subjected to a challenge, and challenged with a severe pathogen, Vibrio, as you can see there on the screen. And Vibrio is a major issue globally for the shrimp industry. As you can see from the graph on the right of the screen, after this, during this challenge, the shrimp fed the ocean feed aqua product actually had a higher survival rate than the control. So this shows both in the application of improved performance and also improved survival with ocean feed aqua in these diets. So that completes the summary of our recent research results, and I'd like to hand back there to Mark now to wrap things up.
Thanks, Ian. Look, I think we're a company which sells a seaweed-based, a blended seaweed ingredient for animal feed. And the basis of our business model and our growth is on the science behind that product, the development of that product, which shows the mode of action, how the product works in the microbiome, and the benefits that it has on the animal. And then secondly, the commercial relevance of the product, because a lot of the work that the team does, in addition to proving that the product works and how it works, is to helping customers then prove to themselves that it works in their own systems with the own challenges that they face in their large-scale production facilities. So hopefully this presentation is giving you a bit more of an overview of those elements of our R&D program, the significant investment that we make in it, and how that is continually driving more commercial opportunities for Ocean Harvest Technology to grow. Jake.
Mark, thank you very much, and Haddon and Ian as well. Thank you very much indeed for your presentation this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab that's situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the team take a few moments to review those questions that were submitted already, I would like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. Haddon, Ian, Mark, as you can see there on the right-hand side in the Q&A tab, we have received a number of questions throughout your presentation this afternoon, and thank you to all of those on the call for taking the time to submit their questions. But Mark, if I may just hand back to you to chair the Q&A session with the team, and then I'll pick up from you at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There is a range of questions here. There's some quite technical science questions, some commercial questions, and some financial questions, but between the three of us, we can certainly get through them all. Could I hand over, guys, for the first one that you can see here, which is asking about whether our product reduces phosphate content in livestock manure, because the question provider also notes that phosphate pollution in watercourses from animal raising is proving to be a barrier in the growth of some agricultural and animal raising units. So Ian, Haddon, well, I'll hand over one of you to address that question.
Yeah, so I'll go first, and Haddon, you may jump in if there's anything else you want to add afterwards. So I suppose first things first, we haven't measured this, so therefore we cannot definitively say whether it does or not. I suppose the significant improvements that we do see in feed efficiency would indicate that the less you're putting in, you know, if we're getting, you know, less in for the same growth, then you will reduce the phosphate, the overall phosphate coming out. Whether it actually reduces any phosphate content in terms of the percentage in the manure or anything like that, that's something that we can't answer without specifically doing the research. But there is obviously environmental benefits, as Haddon noted earlier on, from improving feed efficiency. Haddon, I don't know if you anything to add to that.
No, thanks, Ian. That's excellent. I don't think we have a direct effect on phosphorus or nitrogen, indeed, which is also important. And I was down the River Wye a couple of weeks ago, and I've seen this effect. And yeah, nitrogen and phosphorus are both causing big problems there. But as you say, if we improve feed efficiency by 8%, that's 8% less waste gone into the system. So significant improvement. But we have no direct effect on phosphorus.
Okay. There's some questions here on the space that Ocean Harvest Technology operates in, and how big that market is and how big an addressable market Ocean Harvest Technology has. Look, as I said, we sell a product which goes in as a feed ingredient into animal feed. We talked quite a lot in our recent IPO about the size of the animal feed market, and we talked about there being over 1 billion tons of animal feed produced a year, and even at an inclusion rate of 0.25%, that is a market well beyond any volumes that we could really hope to get to. So the market is significant. And as the team has pointed out, we operate across all species in that. So our business is well diversified across swine, poultry, bovine, aqua, pet, and equine. And we sell across all regions. We've got just under 50% of our business to the Americas, and big shares of our business to Europe and Asia as well. So we're well exposed to that global industry, not just one small part of it. And as you've seen, the application of our feed ingredients is broad. It provides a number of benefits, either the generic benefits of lower mortality and higher growth rates or feed conversion, or some of the more specific ones, such as improved resistance against specific diseases and specific species, like the trial that Ian took you through, talking about Vibrio and shrimp. So it's got broad-based application, but also narrow applications in specific parts of the animal feed sector. As another similar question was, how are we finding the customer acquisition cycles, and how do we identify and attract new customers to the business? So I'll hand over to Haddon to talk you through that.
Okay, traditionally, we've penetrated less than 1% of a market, as Mark hinted there. So we tend to look to the innovators within our industry, and then to do that, we have a sales team, counting myself, that's 6 people, with well over 100 years selling within this industry. So we have trust individually, we have trust with various customers, and we know who the innovators are, and those are the people who we have targeted. Those are the people who Ian described. These are the people who will look at the university trials. They will then run their own trial, and as with our 2 North American friends that we talked about earlier, if the trial is successful, then they will buy the product and use it in their operations. More recently, we have, for example, in the last 3 months, we had 2 European companies who started to buy our product in container load volumes, who would not be described as innovators, but they have seen our name in the market. They have heard of our success, and they decided to buy from us. So we're now moving from that first phase, where adoption of product can take up to 1 year, even up to 18 months, depending on species, to have customers who either phone or email and say, I hear you sell seaweed, I would like to become a customer. So I think we're moving towards that second phase now of towards a slightly faster growth rate, where we don't need to do trials for 1 year to win over a customer. Thank you.
There was another element of that question which I failed to answer, apologies, which says who else operates in this space? I suppose our broader space is the feed ingredient market and additives to try and improve performance in animal feed. And that's an enormous market with multiple products made differently. However, to our best of our knowledge, we are the only and certainly the largest company which is producing an animal feed based purely on a blend of whole seaweeds. So as I said, we source our seaweeds globally, we process it in our factory in Vietnam, and we produce a product which is made entirely of a blend of these different species of whole seaweeds. And there is no one else selling that at any commercial scale that we've seen at any of the trade fairs or the feed exhibitions. So we're the leader in this space. Hence, we're not competing against other producers of seaweed blends. We're competing against the producers of the more traditional additives and ingredients that have been used in animal feed. There is another question here which is slightly related to that, and also yours, Haddon, which is, what are the benefits to customers of using a product that blends multiple different kinds of seaweeds, which is what we do, rather than just using a single species of seaweed? And I'll leave, it's a mixture of commercial and science questions. So Haddon, I'll let you kick off, and Ian as well.
Okay. Every seaweed, not unlike other types of products, tend to have good things, and some of them can also have some things that are not so good. For example, some of the brown seaweeds that are widely used within the industry, also known as kelp, can have high levels of iodine, which is particularly harmful for example, for breeding animals, but also isn't particularly good for dogs or cats. And some of them, the sargassum, for example, you read about in the Caribbean, the one that fouls all the beaches in the Caribbean, is very, very high in arsenic. So in fact, we can't use that in animal feeds. So by blending seaweeds, you can take the good things. Each seaweed has different polysaccharides, different prebiotics in there. So by blending several seaweeds, you can bring in several different polysaccharides, each of which has a positive effect, and you can blend out any negative components that might be in there, such as heavy metals or arsenic. I hope that answers the question.
A question here about what direct competitors you have working in the same seaweed space yourself. I think I just answered that. We don't see anyone else producing a blended product using whole seaweeds. Have we done life cycle analysis on our carbon footprint? Good question. There seems to be lots of food miles from harvest to feed mill. Yeah, exactly. So we have mapped our carbon footprint. We haven't released our results to our customers yet, but that'll be in the next weeks or so. So short of giving you a specific number of kilos per ton of carbon equivalent emissions per ton of ocean feed, what I can tell you is the analysis which has been done by the third party and presented to us gives our seaweed feed ingredient a significantly lower carbon footprint than the feed additives that we compete against, and a lower carbon footprint than a number of the core elements of animal feed, such as wheat, barley, soy, corn, etc. Now, you're right that because we operate with a global supply chain, going to a single factory and then going out to global customers, we do have a big transport footprint. But that is the majority of our carbon footprint, because unlike all of those other ingredients I mentioned, the seaweed that we source, which is wild harvest from the oceans, does not use arable land, it does not use fresh water, and it does not use fertilizer. So hence we have got a much lower footprint. I say much, I mean significant, 30% plus lower footprint than those other ingredients. As we get bigger and we put our factories in different places in the world and the product is transporting less, that would materially further reduce that, because I think it's something like 90% of our current footprint is transport related. And even still, that is, as I said, a 30% lower footprint than the other main components of animal feed. When do we expect to become profitable? We answered this question in the IPO, and there is a research report out on us from FinCap, which you can access if you register on their website. What we've said to people is, obviously we forecast monthly. We see that in the months at the end of next year, the business would turn profitable. So we would expect to be full year profitable in the year of 25. So in the latter months of 2024, and then in the full year of 2025, we would expect the business to be profitable based on the growth rate that we've predicted and explained to investors. Another commercial question. What is the general process for you, Haddon, I believe? What is the general process after a successful trial to lead to commercial order? And how long does that process generally take?
After a successful commercial trial, it can lead very, very quickly to an order. We just had one last week where the trial actually hasn't finished, or at least the data haven't been reported yet, but the customer is happy with what he has seen, and he has said he wants to progress with using ocean feed. But normally, to summarize a trial, takes about a month to get the data together and to analyze it statistically, as Ian will help to do, and then the customers, if he sees a return on investment of let's say 10 to 1 as in Ian's trials that he showed, then he is quite keen to move quickly to use the product. Sometimes they don't put it right across the board, but they might put it in half of their operations for a couple of months just to make sure it works. And that's mainly to check the handling and the delivery and the logistics and things like that. But once they're happy that the product is delivered on time and it's of the quality they expect, then they quite quickly move. So it's a matter of weeks, most months.
Yeah, I mean, it highlights an important point. If a customer is trialing the product, they're trialing to look for results that we've already seen. We've seen them in the results already in university trials. We've seen it in trials with other customers. So if a customer is trialing the product, there's very little risk that they're not going to see what they want to see, because we've done it multiple times before. We've seen that. The risk, not so much the risk, the unknown is probably the timing point, as the person asking the question has raised. Because, yeah, they may have existing stock they want to get rid of. They may have a year-end budgeting process that impacts that. They may have a very influential nutritionist who says, I want the product now. So typically when we look at our new customer pipeline trialing the product, the risk isn't really whether they're going to buy the product or not, because there's a very high chance that the results they get will be the same as what we've seen. It's just around accurately predicting, the timing of that trial finishing and being converted. But the team's got a good record of doing that so far.
Mark, if I may just jump back in there, and Haddon and Ian as well, thank you very much indeed for being so generous with your time then, addressing all of those questions that came in from investors this afternoon. And of course, if there are any further questions that do come through, we'll make these available to you immediately after the presentation has ended, just for you to review, to then add any additional responses, of course, where it's appropriate to do so. And we'll publish all those responses out on the Investor Meet Company platform. But Mark, perhaps before redirecting those on the call to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, if I could please ask you for a few closing comments to wrap up with, that'd be great.
Look, thank you very much for joining. A number of you have heard our story before, because our IPO was recently. As you hopefully see from today, there are three key elements to growth in our business. One is investing in new customers. Two is the R&D and intellectual property, and three is on the supply chain. And we wanted today to give you some more background to what is in the R&D program at Ocean Harvest Technology. And I think you can see it's the basis on which we demonstrate to customers that our product works and why it works. And it's also the basis for which we convert new customers into our system through proving that it works within their own operations. It's a hugely valuable component of the business, and we really wanted to give you some more color on it. We do hope, in similar presentations in future, to be able to do the same for you in relation to the supply chain and the customer acquisition process as we begin this journey with you as a listed company to demonstrate to you how these key components of our business operate. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you got the value out of it that we were hoping to achieve.
Mark, that's great. Ian and Haddon as well, thank you very much indeed for updating investors this afternoon. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Ocean Harvest Technology Group PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good afternoon to you all.